Thank you for joining us today for the Code of Ethics, Course 4, with the Office of Local School Council Relations. Today, our objectives is to understand the ethical behavior expected of LSC members in accordance with the Code of Ethics. Also, how to be compliant with the state and federal law, the Illinois School Code. Understanding potential conflicts of interest, and to provide information on ethical violations that may result in removal from the LSC. Some of the rights and responsibilities of our LSC members is that you must at all times follow the Code of Ethics. Ethics is following the rules that leads to doing what is right. Also, the Code of Ethics applies to CPS officials, board members, and local school council members, employees, board contractors, parents, etc. Anyone has the right and is encouraged to inquire about ethics, compliance, or report potential violations of the Code of Ethics. Our LSC members, network chiefs, our principals, district staff must, I repeat, must report potential violations of the Code of Ethics. Finally, our LSC members must cooperate with the ethics advisor regarding ethics violations. This includes supplying a witness testimony, documents, and other requested information. Some issues that are relevant to local school councils, things you must keep in mind: nepotism. This is favored treatment for relative. Conflicts of interest, which is competing interests which interfere with official duties of an LSC member. Gifts, loans, and favors, anything of value given without payment. No favors here. Also, political activity, involvement in partisan politics using board time, property, or position. Also, economic of interest in contracts and board work. A financial interest with the school where the LSC member serves. And finally, post membership, the within the year after the end of a member's term or resignation from an LSC. So we'll talk a little bit more about this in our next slides. Nepotism. This is when LSC members cannot hire or appoint their relatives or cannot influence or convince others to hire or appoint their relatives. LSC members cannot advocate for employment involving their relatives and cannot advocate for a contractual agreement with a relative or a relative's place of business. LSC members with relatives employed at the school must at all times abstain from voting on their entire budget, entire CIWP, and any transfer of funds that may affect the relative. When we think about our economic interest and conflict of interest, we want members to remember that they cannot have an economic of interest in a contract or business with the school. LSC members cannot have an economic interest in the buying, selling, or leasing of an item for which their school is being paid. LSC members cannot be paid by another employer, third party, for their employment position at the school in which they serve. And finally, LSC members cannot receive money from the school except for reasonable and necessary expenses. So now we're going to go into a scenario to discuss nepotism. Alan Aldermanic Assistant has recently been elected to seat on the Appleton Elementary LSC as a community member. Alan lives in the community and his brother teaches at the school. Alan works for Alderman Risker. Since his election, the Alderman Risker has appeared at a number of school functions, the science fair, reading night, graduations, and soccer games. He has taken photos with Alan and Principal Do-Right. Alan's wife sits on the Friends of Appleton Elementary Board, which plans to introduce a proposal to the LSC for a fundraiser. The funds raised will be used for a new turf field for the school. At the same meeting, Principal Do-Right will present a transfer of funds request to add funds that may affect Alan's brothers. Allen tells Principal Do Right that all funds raised will be matched by the Alderman Risker's office as long as she endorses the Alderman Risker for re-election. Allen tells the principal jokingly that she better have a job for him at the end of school if Alderman Risker is not re-elected. Let's dig into this and review some potential ethical conflicts in this scenario. So, nepotism is not Allen Aldermanic Assistant serving on the LSC, even though his brother teaches at the school, because he can serve on the LSC as long as he lives in that community. However, nepotism applies if he does not abstain from voting on the school's continuous improvement work plan, or CIWP, and the school budget. So remember, he can serve, however, he must abstain from voting on the CIWP and the school budget. Now let's think about some potential conflicts of interest. Allen Aldermanic Assistant may sit on the LSC if he lives within the community boundaries. If an LSC member or his or her spouse sits on the board of a nonprofit organization that raises funds for the school, the LSC member must recuse and abstain from any discussion or vote for that non-for-profit. Allen Alderman Assistant may not vote on fundraising proposals for a new turf field presented by the Friends of Appleton Elementary since his wife sits on their board. That would be a conflict of interest. In addition to this, Allen should also refrain from soliciting support for the proposal among other LSC members. Those are two separate things and should not be intertwined. So a conflict of interest would be if Allen is soliciting support amongst any LSC members and should always refrain from doing so. Now let's look at potential ethical conflicts in political activity. So Alderman Risker is permitted to attend school events in his capacity as alderman. That's a natural thing that aldermen do. They support their school communities. Alderman Risker can also donate money to the school. Also very natural. However, while Principal Do Right should not pose for pictures specifically for campaign literature, it's not a violation of the code if he appears in a photo taken at a school event. Again, very natural, as long as they are not soliciting or promoting campaign literature. Principal Do Right may not endorse Alderman Risker in her official capacity as a principal. Also, should not endorse Alderman Risker in exchange for money for the school, as that would be an ethical violation. Finally, our post membership. Even if Allen Alderman Assistant meets the job qualifications, he cannot be employed at Appleton Elementary School for 1 year following the time he resigns from the LSC or his term is completed. There is a gap that has to take place between that time before Allen is hired at that school and working in that position of a school in which he served on the LSC. So it would need to be 1 year following that time. If you have additional questions regarding any of our ethical policies, feel free to reach out to your principal who could assist you with guidance, or you can contact LSC Relations and your specialist for any assistance. Thank you so much for taking the training.